Good
Hello.
morning. Oh, go ahead, Eden. Go ahead.
Sorry.
No, I forgot.
Welcome back to Social Studies Online. My name is Eden Cho. I'm a museum educator at the National Museum of American History. We're so grateful you're able to join us, whether that's live or in an archived version. If you're joining us live, remember that you're able to ask any questions you may have during our time here by commenting in the chat box. We just ask that you keep your private information private. Full transparency, we are having a few technical difficulties. You'll notice that we're not in our usual Learning Lab collection, but the link will remain the same. You'll be able to access that after. And you also may see me disappear for a while. We'll see. We hope you enjoy, and I'm going to turn over the introductions to our host today, Orlando Serrano.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Eden, thank you very much. Yeah, folks, we are having a little bit of a technical issue today, but we're gonna be okay. We've got a plan B, and we're very excited to join you today to talk about LGBTQIA plus History Month. And we're gonna have two guests with us today. First, we're gonna be speaking with Catherine Ott, and she'll introduce herself in a second. And after a small break, we're gonna be joined with Jane Rogers. And we're excited about this conversation today. So, Catherine, thank you for joining us. Can you please say a little bit about your work and what you do at the National Museum of American History?
Yeah, so good morning, everyone. Buenos dias, bonjour, whatever, keep going. I'm Catherine Ott. I am here at my home, teleworking in Piscataway, Nacogdoches Country, ancestral lands, also known as Washington, D.C. I live about a mile and a half from the White House. I am a curator, a historian in the history of medicine and science at the museum. I am white and typically abled. I have citizenship status. My pronouns are any. What else should I say? My fun fact, my bike is so you can see it, is a blue hybrid, a light. There it is behind me. I like to keep my bike close. I'm a bike by the way, if you have ever wondered what a grown-up, like way grown-up queer person looks like, Orlando and Eden asked me to come and talk about LGBTQ history. So I pulled up some stuff from several thousand of our museum objects that are related to gender non-conforming people, such as myself. So should I just talk? What do you think?
Yeah, I will.
Okay.
Well, I'll go ahead and pull up our first cultural resource.
The bus, yeah.
Yeah, and go ahead and please tell us a little about this particular object
Sure.
and why you chose it.
So queer history is huge, and it goes way back in time, way too much to explain in a few minutes. Even if I really talk really fast like this, I still couldn't do it. So I figured I could make 4 points with 4 objects, starting with this bus. So let's talk about bullying. Yeah, let's do that. It's always been dangerous to be different, just like today. Teasing and bullying starts when you're young, and there are grown-up bullies too, like microaggression and road rage and trolls and stuff. The good news is that you can learn to deal with it and not let them tell you not let them tell your story or take the fun out of being you. And history can show you some tips on how to do that. By the way, I was bullied all through grade school for not being what a girl's supposed to be, and it was pretty hard. I cried a lot. I also punched a couple of boys. Not proud of that. And I kept asking my parents, like, why is this happening? Why won't they stop? Never got a good answer. People throughout history have had to deal with the same kind of stuff. And so let me tell you what Billy did with his toy bus back in the 1980s. He lived in Indiana, and he had to ride the school bus every day, where he was trapped with his tormentors. He was gay and called names you know what happens, what bullies do. And when he got home, he would play with this yellow bus and imagine the bullies eat the bus eating the bullies. Crunch, 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 like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Go ahead.
Catherine, I appreciate you bringing that up. And, you know, for those of us who you know, grew up riding the bus to school, it's very interesting. I had never, as you were telling that story right now, I remembered I also did not like taking the bus either, because it is an enclosed space from which you cannot escape. And there were times where I was picked on for being different, not necessarily for being gender nonconforming or not being, as you put it, what a girl should be like, but the idea that this is an opportunity for tormentors to have their way with their prey, and Billy reimagining it when he got home is a great way that you're saying, as you mentioned earlier, to tell the story differently. Well, let's move on to our next object.
Okay. So it used to be really hard to find other people like yourself if you were LGBTQ plus. And once you did, it could still be dangerous, even illegal in some places, to do stuff in public. Like there were laws that you had to, if you were a woman or identified as a woman, you had to have 3 items of women's clothing on, or otherwise you could be arrested. So there were other laws about holding hands and other kinds of stuff. But once you found some friends who like get you, what did you do? Same thing as today, basically. Play dates, hang out, except there was no TikTok or Instagram or internet stuff. But house parties in the 1950s. This is a 45 RPM record from back then. There's one song on each side, and people will come to your house. Sometimes a potluck of food was involved. They smoked cigarettes back in the olden times. They drank, they talked, they kissed maybe. They danced to music on the radio or records, and they sang together with records like this one from an artist named Lacey Baker, which is an anagram for the word lesbian, if you rearrange the letters. Pretty tricky, right?
Good.
Her real name was Edith Ide, and she covered popular songs with LGBTQI plus lyrics. She changed the pronouns around, and it was really fun. Pronouns were even a bigger deal back then, if you can believe it, than they are now. But even back then, there were many ways to be LGBTQI plus, bringing me to the next object. Unless, Orlando, do you want to say something?
Well, I mean, I appreciate the, you know, I appreciate and am both and saddened at the same time at the creativity required, right, to get messages across. So it's interesting to hear about, you know, in the same ways that, you know, when you think of abolition movements and the markers that they would leave outside of their homes to let folks know that these are safe spaces, the playfulness with which, you know, lesbian becomes Lacey Baker to signal to community like this is a safe place for you. Okay, well, let's go to the next one.
Going underground. So we can always find queer people in history. So if you're queer, you're not alone, no matter how much it feels like that. And no matter what your identity, what kind of unicorn you may be, there have always been other people like you to find in history. And as a historian, I can guarantee that that is true. Like take transgender, for example. There were, back in time, there were people who were biologically male who lived as female, females who lived as male. They dressed that way, used names, pronouns, even got married according to the gender they believed themselves to be. And this is the transgender flag. It was created by Monica Helms in 1999. That is Monica on the end with wearing glasses, hanging out with two of her friends, maybe a house party, I don't know. But we know from history that no one is just one thing with one identity or one major interest. People are gay and dyslexic and Muslim. Even during a single day, the parts of you that matter, like come and go, depending on what's going on, depending on what's making you really happy or afraid or angry. People take action. And people who are oppressed and discriminated against for being different are very likely at some point to get busy on it, bringing me to the last object. Orlando, do you want to say something before we reveal?
No, well, yes, wrong. Yes, obviously, I'm going to say something. I like the way that you're, and appreciate the way you're signaling the complicated intersecting parts of our lives, right? That we aren't just one thing, right? The idea of binaries in any sort of category of identification are misnomers, because there's constantly fluidity throughout the different parts of our identities, which sets up our last object excellently. So please tell us about this protest.
Okay. So these are marchers in 1985 at the South African Embassy here in DC. You can note the black and white color that signals that it's ye olden times. The signs they're holding say Black lesbians and gays against apartheid. South Africa had a system of apartheid back then, which was a kind of really brutal racial segregation. And it ended in 1990, 93, something like that. This is Nelson Mandela days. But even though this was happening in Africa and not in their neighborhood, it mattered, because important things are worth fighting for. So, yeah.
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes, and that every time I see it or read it, it reminds me of exactly what you're talking about. It's from Audre Lorde, in which she says, "I do not have the luxury of fighting one oppression at a time." Right? There are multiple parts of us for different communities that are assaulted from multiple sides, because we are complicated folks with multiple valences of existence in the world. Well, Catherine, thank you very much for taking time to be with us today and sharing some objects out of the collection. And we are a couple of days out from National Coming Out Day, and we appreciate you joining us to share these resources. Are there any parting words that you would like to share with folks who are joining us either live or who will see this later on once we archive it?
I will say that history is really, really interesting and fun, and people are strange and unusual, as well as unpredictable and often disappointing and mean, of course, but understanding what happened and why is really important, because for me personally, it helps me be less confused about the things that make no sense or just seem wrong, like gender stuff or racism or the mess the environment is in. And knowing more about how it happened can help me understand how to change it. And the other thing about why to keep learning and keep coming back to these social studies online is that not talking about or finding out about the past, especially painful things, is really dangerous, especially for the people who are not talked about or the people left out. So we owe it to them to remember them, and we owe it to each other to ask those hard questions about why, and not accept everything that we're taught or we're told without proof or without facts and without thinking about it and understanding what happened. So basically, history is really fun. Knowing stuff is great. Thank you for giving me some time this morning. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much, Catherine, for joining us. And we will hopefully see you around the building soon. But thank you for joining us today online.
Bye, everybody. Take care.
Well, Eden, what is something that stood out to you from what we just learned with Catherine?
Her introduction. We've ever had a curator who is just very refreshingly honest about who she is.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I wish I had my bike close by now. Is what I wish. You never know when you need it. All right. Well, we are going to shift gears a little bit here and welcome another guest. And what we're going to do is something that we started doing this series of social studies online, which is use a thinking routine to help us practice close looking, analysis of different kinds of objects when we encounter them, either in a classroom or when we get a chance to go out into the world, when we see different monuments, objects, going to museums and see different cultural resources, artifacts, or paintings. So with that, I'd like to welcome Jane. And Jane, thank you for being with us. And before we get started and look to some of the resources you brought to share with us today, can you please tell us a little bit about what you do at the museum?
Sure. I don't know if I can follow Catherine's. I don't have my bike here, but my name's Jane Rogers. I'm a curator with the sports collection. So I collect all types of sports, especially extreme sports. I like skateboarding, surfing. I also do a lot of adaptive sports. So Catherine and I have worked together on quite a number of projects. Our Special Olympics exhibit was one of them, which was really cool. But yeah, I've been with the museum for 30 years, so studying sports history.
Wonderful. Thank you for, the Special Olympics exhibit is great.
Yeah.
Whenever we're open, folks, please come back and check that out. I appreciate the small interactive spaces that are there as well. Yeah. All right. Well, let's move to our first resource, Jane. And the thinking routine that we're going to do today is called Values, Identities, and Actions. And it requires us to pause and to look and to ask questions. And so, Jane, the first question that I have for you is, you know a little bit about who's behind this skateboard deck. And the question I have for you is, what are some of the values that the work on this skateboard deck, the art, asks us to think about?
Yeah. So the Unity skateboard deck, Unity Skateboards was created by Jeffrey Chung and Gabriel Ramirez, and they are two queer men, and they wanted a space where they could be more accepted. The skate community is a very small community, and it's a very accepting community. But as Catherine was saying, that there's always somebody who is not going to welcome you in. So they wanted a free space where they could get together and skate. And Jeffrey created the skateboard. He hand paints every one of these skateboard decks. So it takes him, he does like 1,100 a year, and they're all hand painted. He is an artist by trade. So he takes his experience as a queer man and kind of broadcasts that to the world through these skate decks.
Thank you, Jane. So, I mean, on the face of it, thank you for the story of Jeff and Gabriel and the work that they do. So the one of the values, I'm assuming, is unity, right? It's written right there on there.
Right.
And then in terms of who this is speaking to, who is it speaking to? You mentioned that the skating community is, for the most part, open and accepting, even though it's small. Like who is this for? Who is this trying to call out to?
I think this is, just like Catherine said, this is for all the people who want to be accepted, but they want a safe space to do that. Mm-hmm. And so this is Unity Skateboards, Jeffrey's way of saying, hey, we have these skate sessions. We put out flyers in spaces. And so for LGBTQ plus people, trans people, queer, non-conforming, they all had a safe space to come, and that they knew they weren't going to get bullied. And you know, kind of ridiculed for the way
Mhm.
they dressed or the way they looked. And so, you know, basically bringing people together in a safe space.
Okay. So that's in large part the action that Jeff is calling us to then, you know, to create safe spaces, to invite people in. You know, can you say a little bit as we're going to shift to our next skateboard deck? Can you say a little bit about skateboard deck art and the way that folks use the canvas that is a skate deck to communicate particular messages? I mean, I think back to my days as a skateboarder and someone who grew up in Los Angeles. For me, Girl and Chocolate were the skateboard decks of choice. But can you say a little bit about the way folks used the skateboard deck to communicate messages?
Yeah. So, I mean, throughout history, skateboard decks, they have come kind of where there wasn't anything on them. And then in the 80s, they were all kind of loud and cartoony. And in the 90s, they became, when skateboarding became more do-it-yourself, they became a little more personal for the skater. A pro skater may have some type of like activism they wanted to do. We have a Klansman deck that shows, you know, very political, the views of this skater in question. And so a skateboard deck that you're skating on can be very personal. Like pro skateboarder, the transgender skate deck here from Cher Strawberry, this was her first signature deck. And so obviously her name is Strawberry. There's strawberries on the deck. On the reverse side, it's all pink, and it has her kind of, we don't have the reverse. We had that online somewhere, I think. But it has her kind of in a little skirt, because she always wears skirts, and it's just like a cartoon stick figure of her, but it's really cute. But I mean, that's who she is. You know, a lot of skate decks show the personality of the skater.
So can you say a little bit more? And folks out there, we apologize for not having the other image in which Cher is there with the wearing the skirt. We will get that on the Learning Lab collection for certain when we archive it. But can you, knowing that that's on the other side of it, can you say a little bit about the values that this deck is trying to communicate? As you mentioned, the way in which skaters use the skate decks to distribute a message. What is Cher saying? What is the value that she's trying to get across by putting the strawberries and the image of her in a skirt out there?
Sure. I think it's basically just telling people that this is who she is. You know, she is a girl who wears skirts, who likes strawberries, who, you know, she's not going to have anybody else tell her who she is or who she has to be, how she has to dress, how she has to look. You know, she is Cher Strawberry, and this is who she is. And that's what her deck is saying.
Wonderful. And then what, in putting herself out there, what action is Cher asking other folks to take?
To basically accept her as she is, you know, see past, you know, possibly her not looking exactly like a girl, but the fact that she is a girl, she identifies as a woman, and this is who she is. And, you know, accept me for who I am, and I'm not going to change. And she will tell you that.
All right. Thank you, Jane. We have one more object. And with this one, if you could please just tell us a story about this chest binder and the role it played in Lacey's life and her work as a professional skateboarder.
Sure. Actually, we need to change this this thing on the web, because she now goes by Leo Baker. So they are, as I should say, always trip me up. They are a gender nonconforming person, and they wear this chest binder in, they had worn this in competition, and they had given it to us as a part of, this is part of who they are. So Leo Baker was Lacey Baker. She started on skateboarding as a blonde-haired, you know, long blonde hair California girl, and she competed in this way for quite a while. They knew that they were gender nonconforming from about, you know, 18 on, but it was very difficult in skate competitions because there's a women's division and a men's division. So where do they fit in, being, you know, not identifying as a woman, identifying more as a male, but not being, where do they fit?
Yeah.
So it was very difficult for them to find a space, and it led to them their late kind of renaissance.
Yeah.
In fact, that now that they are Leo Baker, so they are identify as more masculine, and therefore they wear this chest binder in order to flatten the breasts so that it is not as obvious, identifying as more male. They don't want to stand out in that way, more a gender neutral type look.
Well, and Jane, do they now compete in the men's division, the women's division, or both? Do they move back and forth?
They do not. There really is no. I mean, this is kind of just recently. They still as a woman in the women's division. They compete in women's divisions, and they are actually on the U.S. national skate team to go to the Olympics. Competing in the women's division. They actually have said in interviews that it's probably a good thing that this Olympics was postponed because they are not sure if they should compete in the women's. And I think at this point in their career, they are really looking to identify as a gender nonconforming, and that may mean that maybe they're not as interested in competing. They have a project that she works on that they work on, kind of getting the word out to the LGBT community and making, again, people feel safe in a space where they can be accepted for who they are.
Okay. Well, Jane, thank you very much for joining us and sharing these. I when you shared the resources with us, I was taken aback at like how much was in the skateboarding community that applied to today, today's discussion, I should say. And for those folks who may be curious that we can add resources to later, are there any other upcoming projects that you're working on that get at the intersection of some of these issues with sports or extreme sports and gender rights or gender issues?
Right. I'm actually writing a book on the skate collections. Hopefully come out in the next year or two. But all this will be included. It's get out to the skate community and include everybody, disabled skaters, gender nonconforming skaters, just anybody involved in the skate community. It's a pretty diverse group. So we want to share that with everybody.
Okay. All right, Jane, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it, and we will look for that book when it comes out. Please let us know. We will be glad to plug it and have you back.
There you go. I'll be there.
All right. Bye, Jane.
Bye.
All right, Eden. Well, that was a lot, and we had two separate guests who brought a wealth of resources for folks out there. And as we start making our way out, can you say a little bit about where folks might get these resources if they're interested, and what's coming up next?
Sure. So if you go to the next slide, again, we are having a bit of technical difficulties, but we will have this link up and live very soon, filled with resources. The link is already live. We just need to fill it with the resources from today's Social Studies Online. And we are here every other Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. We'll be back on Thursday, October 22nd at 11 a.m. with a discussion on elections. So I'm really excited for that topic. I'm sure we'll have a lot to say then as well. If that's a topic of interest to you, please stop by. And we hope you stay safe and healthy.
Yes. Thank you very much for joining us, everybody. And follow up with us, ask us questions. You can get those resources, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Bye, everyone.